And if you can't get an attorney, always look into the ACLU. But,
That's
hey.
right. And, the funny thing is there are always great local resources, legal resources available through most county agencies, nonprofit or for-profit, where you can get help. If you need to talk to someone, there just seems to be, most of the counties are able to provide some type of legal resources and direct you in the right, the right way to handle the event. But when it comes to committing crimes and being interviewed by the police, it's just never in your best interest.
And nobody should, the one thing I always trip out is people just automatically just start lying whether they've done nothing wrong or what.
Right. Well,
just because they're scared.
Or a gun, what are you going to do? The big thing is it is intimidating for most people.
Yes.
And, and anything that you think might look suspicious, anything, your dog's not licensed. Uh-oh, the police are here, it's just one of those things that, why have contact if you don't need it?
Just remember also that there's still people, and that we need to realize that we're not all at odds with each other, and that maybe if we could stop and realize they are people, they have a family, usually.
I would love to give you an example. I used to have to write a certain amount of tickets every month, and I hated writing tickets.
Oh, see, I never understand this, the quotas. I get so worried about driving at the beginning and the end of every month.
Right, it's funny. But when I come up to a car and somebody is really, really nice to me, I'm like, oh, I just can't write them a ticket. And then I say, did you know why I stopped you? Yeah, I was speeding. Oh, they told me the truth. And each time there's an act of kindness, it makes it that much harder to write a ticket. And so there are many people out there like me who just go, wow, this person was so nice, I just can't write them a ticket today. And so, yes, they are people, and yes, they do respond to polite, kind acts just like anybody else. There are some aggressive folks out there who don't, and that's because they're working in an area where they're constantly being bombarded with violence, and they become
and from
violent.
False information being fed to assume that everybody out there, we always hear all these bad stories, like the electricity goes out, everybody's going to go looting, and that's really not the truth. They tend to show people the worst of other people just to make us fear, to make us to find differences, and that's what I think that we need to start realizing, that police are people too,
Absolutely. Some of my best friends are still police.
Speak to them. If you have knowledge, spread it. Maybe they've never heard of the Oath Keepers. They're not aware, that there is a group that helps you support, what your true oath is, when you say you swear to the Constitution, and that's your first primary, like all military and all people do. There are alternatives, but they're just not aware, and maybe if we can, instead of automatically seeing them as your enemy.
I could add this though. We give them that civic authority. Their absolute power comes from us.
Yes.
And if we decide as a group of people across this country to say, we are going to control and manage how our police behave because we want certain responses from them, and we become knowledgeable on how police departments work and direct them, then the next thing you know, we've got what we want. And that's the key to success, transparency.
Yeah. But we're taught now we need the government money, so we got to live by the government regulations to be able to get the money to reinforce the money that's already coming from the cities for the police departments.
Right.
And so now you get the government's control automatically put in, and just because we think we can't survive without their monetary assistance. And again, there's this false paradigm that money is power.
Yes.
And in my opinion, I think it's more community and knowledge. And if we can start realizing this and like you say, actually turn your back on the falseness and realize that if we stand up and we demand something different because it's what works for our community, then nobody can argue with what works for your community. That's the way the Constitution made this nation workable nation. The government was meant only to determine commerce between states,
right,
and serious injury to our borders. That's it.
Right.
And now it's overreaching into even the police force, which is meant to be a community effort. That is meant to be and that's supposed to be our extra hand.
And I'm so against national police forces, and I'm against agencies like the ATF and the DEA. Those should all be brought back down to a local level, because no one knows better than the community police officer what's affecting the safety of their community. When done right, a community police officer is probably the most important tool a community has, because they do more than enforce the law. They also provide support, and they provide resources so people can get support. There's so much more to policing than what we see our government doing with national police. And it's a shame that we've gone that direction. We don't need them. You don't. No. My submission is we don't even need state police. We actually need county-level police.
Yes.
And that's it.
And that used to be the force. Like the last say-so was what it used to be the sheriff, correct?
That's correct. And in many cultures that is still the case. Even in areas where I live, and especially in the great state of Nevada, some of the outer counties, they don't recognize anybody but the sheriff. And so you have a hard time getting in. I couldn't even imagine a federal agency going out and talking to some of the ranchers out there, because they don't like them, but they will talk to the sheriff. So it's very interesting.
It is, because see, if we could get back to that, because they're in community. Their community is their family.
Right.
And people stand up for their family. And we sit here and disconnect and make police officers work in different counties. And now you have military coming home to practice like urban warfare to get them desensitized.
Oh, no, that's going to be a terrible tragedy for our country if we don't integrate those young people correctly on the way back. And we certainly don't want to put them directly into law enforcement, because we are going to see a higher incidence of use of forces and just so much danger to the people.
It is, and it really doesn't take much. I mean, I know it seems so overwhelming to so many people, but seriously, if we can just interact and get to know your community, get to know your neighborhood, and even if the police come from outside the community, talk to them. Hey, they might teach you something that like what Frank is sitting here trying to teach us all, that it doesn't take much if you just learn, and you learn from others' experiences, and that's the way it used to be, Parents used to teach their children what they learned in life, and children actually listened, and now, no, the parents just don't in front of the TV and think that makes do.
It's really hard to get children to listen. I have young children, even though I'm much older, and it's definitely a battle every day. So
but it's a worthwhile one.
Sure it is. Absolutely. It's the greatest thing. There's no greater reward than teaching your children morality and character and
from your
courage.
Point of view, not somebody else's.
Yes, that's right. From your point of view. Yeah, I don't. Well, my children don't go to public school because I don't agree with a lot of their programs. And
I'm with you there. I have a 4-year-old that I'm just now teaching at home because I don't want to. I just can't. The idea of having like a kindergartner come home and give parents tickets because they use too much water or too much electricity, and all of a sudden somebody else's ideals are infiltrating what should be taught by the community and the family unit.
Right. And I agree with that, and that's where I think that schools have overreached their authority too. In many ways, the way they handle discipline and the way they handle education, and those things are all suspect to me. And
okay, and yes, you have experience with this, right? So
yes,
what do you feel about now all of a sudden police and external forces being able to come in and search like high school students' lockers and belongings under a guise of gang activity? What's your opinion when it comes to this kind of?
That's just silly. No, but before I go down that path, I do want to say this. The children who are in those schools, I want them to be so protected, and I want the gang activity to be so far away from the campuses that sometimes that those tools may scare, the gun on the campus. It may take care of that because of the searching that goes on. But I don't agree with any search that is not consistent with the Fourth Amendment. It just has to be. We have to only search people when we have probable cause.
Instead of every single locker in every single classroom.
Yeah, that's not fair to anybody. And if you're looking for guns, great. But if you're looking for anything other than a weapon, then it shouldn't be allowed. And I've been involved in a few shootings over the years, and some of them on campus. And I have to say that, I think guns near campuses are a mistake, and I don't want that to happen. However, I don't want anybody's locker to be searched randomly or consistently or in any other type of program that they want to follow. Our policy is we do random searches consistently once a month. Well, that's not okay. let's get away from that and let's just try to, work as
If you start it then, the kids are kind of desensitized and they kind of expect it later in life too. So
absolutely, we're training them to let the government violate their Fourth Amendment rights, and we don't need that in this country. We need young, bright people to understand that there are some great things in the Constitution that will protect you, and use them, and you can change the whole world, and so it's important, and we just have to get everybody back to thinking, and these blanket searches and these blanket approaches to security are not intelligent. They're just throw a lid on something and hopefully it goes away. It's not the way to do it.
It's definitely not, and I've seen many schools now that remind me quite much so to prison facilities, not only on the whole structure, but down to the gates and the barbed wire on top.
It's funny you should say that, because I said that to someone less than a week ago. I said schoolyards are looking more like prison yards, and I have experience in both areas, than they are schoolyards. And I said, that's not okay. Does anybody have a problem with that? And they're like, well, we've got to keep everybody safe. And I'm like, no, we don't. We need to teach them more to be a community, and let's get rid of that stark-looking playground where I've seen friendlier smiles in a prison than on some of the playgrounds because the kids are so terrified. You don't need that. You can't learn in that environment.
No, and now they're so afraid of gangs and everything else. The kids all have to wear like 2-color shirts and one pair of jeans.
Yeah, isn't that terrible? We really got to
again reminding me of the stripes in prison.
Yes, right. And then you see them kind of hanging out in little groups because one's wearing blue and the other one's wearing red, and they're staring at each other, and you're like, well, they're only in the 3rd grade. What's wrong with that? It's terrible. So, yeah, I agree with you, and I think that, we need a radical change in our approach to education, too, how we approach each individual instead of trying to approach the masses at the lowest level of performance. We have to change that.
Yeah, I think we need to raise our expectations and maybe change completely our approach. Every child is different, and I saw this thing the other day. Seriously, it was saying like kids are being brought out at school where they're definitely set in groups by age, like as in their production date is the most important factor on how the child's going to learn and experience life. And that's not the case. The kids are very different and should be taken as such. It looks like we had one more caller that wanted to chime in, so while we get a chance, I was going to bring him in real quick.
Okay.
The 801 area code, who am I speaking with?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Wynn Westmoreland. I'm just waiting to be a guest on the next segment, I guess.
Oh, cool. I'll hold on, because proof's there. It's not a problem, man. Just that's cool. Hang on.
Okay, great. Well, you know what, though? I agree with you 100% there, and I don't think that any children or any individual learns the same way and at the same age. And most public schools are not geared to teach boys, for example. Because boys
not at all.
Can learn in a school, and then they get in trouble because they wonder why they want to go out and chase, birds or run around the playground with reckless
why they
abandon.
want to be boys.
They want to be boys. Yeah, how terrible is that we're torturing them by sitting them in a classroom and feeding them something that they can't hope to really accomplish until they're older and more mature. And yet, because school systems are so slow and so inflexible, they can't make that change themselves. It's terrible.
Very much so. The kids are overwhelmed with all this overstimulation. They are in a world that is so amazing now. They get information via their phones, their little iPads, their computers, the TV. They're overwhelmed with information and stimulus. And then all of a sudden they go to school and they're penalized for being bored and not paying attention. So they give them pharmaceuticals saying, here, pay attention to the boring stuff because your world's so overwhelming everywhere else. And this is supposed to help who?
This helps the teacher, so the teacher has classroom management success. Because anybody outside of who can sit there quietly for 8 hours is going to be medicated, That's what the teacher wants, so that they don't have to deal with that wonderful, brilliant, student who is maybe disruptive.
Exactly. The only thing that this world creates at this point is standardized tests and standardized people and all below a level that the human mind and human ability is capable of. And we could be so much more. And all it takes is stepping outside of your set limits and realizing that we are people, that we're not a machine, that we're not stamp date made this day, and this is what you're
Nicole, imagine this, though. If we were that smart, wouldn't they have something to worry about? But, I mean, obviously, it wouldn't be in the government's best interest to have all of us be really talented because they'd have to be accountable.